The views and opinions expressed do not necessarily represent those of Access Fort Wayne, the Allen County Public Library, or any other supporting group. Access Fort Wayne is a department of the Allen County Public Library. If you or anyone you know might be interested in making a television show, please call 260-421-1250.
Hi, I'm Dr. Rudy Cashman. Welcome to the Mind, Body, Spirit show today. These can be very informative, help with any health problems you might have, or if you, in this one especially because it's about our weight. We all had a problem one time or another with it, even myself, now at 137 pounds this morning, but in the past that was different, okay? Till my knowledge base build up, and I'm here today to bring out knowledge. This is a judgment-free zone. We're not judging anybody, so relax, be open-minded, and see learn and act on it if you need to, okay? So we're having, the main reason I'm really doing this, that we're having an epidemic in this country and pandemic across the world of type 2 diabetes, which causes 30 to 50 diseases. And I don't want you to have them. And that's what this show is all about. A lot of it is related to weight, but also to the blood test. So let's start on this trip together and see if we can't keep a smile on our face and dance along, okay? So it's a pandemic. It's all over the world. I have a number of books here which I'm going to hold up for you. The first one is Fat Chance by Robert Lustig. An excellent book to read. I mean, a really excellent book to read. He's a pediatric endocrinologist. Been all over the world. I think he's in California now, but he was in Tennessee and across the world. Extremely knowledgeable. I really do like his book. And he's saying it's an epidemic in this country, a pandemic. This county is one of the worst, actually, in the United States, in the incidence of diabetes. Most people don't know. So it's my privilege to pass along some information. The World Health Organization says the rate of being overweight and obesity has doubled in 20 years. They said that in 2008, okay? And they think it's going to get worse yet. They see now it causes more diseases than smoking. Remember I said, you'll hear heart attacks and strokes and cancer. Diabetes is a cause of it. They're not separate diseases. Important thing to keep in mind. In the world, 2008, the World Health Organization thought 1.5 billion are overweight in the world, and let's face it, it's probably more than that. So we are gaining fat, we're getting fatter, and we're getting sicker, okay? And a lot of diseases associated with being overweight. Diabetes and its 30 to 50 illnesses especially associated with it. So our cancer, what I think has happened is that industry, the medical profession especially, they have hearts in front of the hospital, they have cancer things in front of the hospital, but they're not teaching you how to prevent, reverse these illnesses through proper lifestyle. They're trying to sell you something in an operation or a drug. Those things are important at times, but prevention should be number one, and it is not in this country. But I'm trying to help with that, okay? So when you're overweight, a lot of that have metabolic diseases, okay? where there are changes in the chemistry of your body, and I explained that in more detail. But there's a cluster of metabolic diseases: obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, heart attack, strokes, thyroid disease, lipid disorders, renal disease, liver disease, skin diseases, dementia. Alzheimer's disease is related 57% to diabetes, so it can be avoided, which I notice the American Alzheimer's Association doesn't hardly ever mention it. Most people don't know it. You could avoid most dementia by getting rid of diabetes, okay? So it's growing by leaps and bounds. Non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, not from alcohol, is more common than alcoholic liver disease now. So liver transplants will become extremely common operation in the future, and if you don't have it, you're probably not going to live. And you can imagine all the things you have to go through to have that done. There's an increased incidence in children. Yes, the biggest rise in obesity in this nation between 2 and 6 year olds. That's sad. That's sad. And we're not properly testing these children for the very beginning of diabetes, and I'll explain that to you in more detail. So when does being overweight start? Actually, in the intrauterine. Mm-hmm. When you're in the placenta, it's what the mother and father ate before conception. Then once the conception has occurred, the baby is captive to the placenta, and what the mother is eating, how she's exercising, how stressed she is reflected onto the child. Mm-hmm. So the child inherited the DNA, but while it's in the belly, it can be influenced through something called epigenetics upon your genes. Our DNA, our genes at the end have what are called telomeres, and these telomeres can be modified by the activity of the mother. So it's extremely important what type of food that the mother is eating, because through epigenetics can change the gene expression of the infant. They can be underweight, overweight. It can determine whether they'll be obese or thin or have diabetes or have cancer or abnormalities. Mm-hmm. The mother can influence that. So that's something very important to understand. Some mothers through gestational diabetes, they check the blood sugar, I think, at 20 weeks or something, or 21 weeks, and find out if mothers have it. They may not have shown any evidence of high blood sugars, but they get themselves tested as they get along in their pregnancy, and we can detect the beginning of diabetes. And their children more commonly have diabetes, so it's critical to educate them. We now, in this country, have 160,000 or so, probably 200 now, of bariatric surgeries, where we do surgeries for being overweight. Some are stapling, for example, is quite effective, can get rid of your diabetes in 2 weeks, but they're done. Trouble is, that's not a lifetime, okay? Long-term studies really haven't been done very much, and what they're really doing is, when you have bariatric surgery, they're starving you. They staple the stomach. It's maybe a fifth or a third of its size, so you can't eat very much. It's really a form of calorie restriction. Mm-hmm. But if it made you better, if you can change your habits, because you're psychologically addicted to medication, it may be a good idea. So I think it does have some value, okay? And about 32 million were clearly diabetic on Obamacare. They get the statistics to 2019. The people become disabled, they get their legs amputated, or they become blind, have heart attacks and strokes. And that reduces the productivity of the nation, because increased medical cost We spend about almost $200 billion on medical costs for people that have weight problems in their diseases and the diabetes. They think in 2030, we'll probably have 65% of the nation will be obese. That's a BMI, body mass index, over 30. Different for blacks, different for Asians. So that's not totally correct, okay? So you think in the past, 20, 30, 50,000 years ago, there weren't any obese, okay? Well, that's wrong too, because they found, it was called the Venus fat trap, which was a sculpture they found made out of stone that had a very big abdomen. So there were people that they were not all healthy, okay? Now we have the law of thermodynamics, because they speak about a calorie in is a calorie out, okay? Well, that doesn't really work. That's what they thought for years, and some still believe that. But because of metabolism, fat, salts, and sugar metabolize differently, okay? If you eat some fat, only 4% used up in metabolism. If protein, about 20%. Vegetables depend what you're eating. If you eat high fiber vegetables, maybe you'll lose 20, 30% because the fiber is not digested. You put it out in your stool. You take 1,000 in, but a significant number of calories can make their way out in the stool. So it depends on the type of food you're eating. That's the thing to remember. If you want to change the way you're eating, that type of food, that's good news. That's really just good news. Change the type of food, 6 weeks, diabetes probably be gone. Okay? So a calorie in is not a calorie out because it's metabolized differently. Normally, in years past, and still today, they'll say, you're responsible for what you eat. You account for being overweight and being obese. It's due to gluttony, eating too much, and sloth. You're not moving. Well, Dr. Lustig feels that really is not correct. He says your motivation of what you seek to eat is actually related to your biochemistry of your body. Yeah. What has the environment done to you? Have you been eating nothing but fast food, which is government food, really? Eating nothing but fast food has changed the metabolism of your body. So your weight gain, your obesity can be largely related to the environment around you. But there's no doubt personal responsibility plays some part. But when you see that donut, for example, you may be psychologically, driven to it because we have the hedonic pathway of dopamine and serotonin. You need a quick fix. It's been a stressful day. Have the donut. Believe me, it happens to me, okay? But as long as you don't do it very often, you might get away with it, okay? But today, the average size dress today, 14, based on statistics. Stores don't carry much size 14, okay? Usually around 10 or so. So people become depressed and anxious and insulted. And if they're teenagers, they call them every name you can think of because the children are overweight. So my emphasis is at children. Test the children, teach the children, because the parents may be handing them the wrong food. I finished rereading an excellent book on the psychology of eating and obesity by Emily Bowler, who lives in Fort Wayne here. She works with my friend Dr. Furman, who you've all heard about. Eat to Live, that's Dr. Furman. And she speaks about her life. Her mother was a tremendous cook, did nothing but pastries and good cookies, and she thought she was doing wondrous things when in reality she was addicting her daughter, and the whole family became ill. She talks a lot in that excellent book Starved to Obesity by Emily Boulder, about the psychology of eating. Remember, I talked about the hedonic pathway, the quick fix, the dopamine, the donut, and the serotonin, the long-term fix. Okay? And insurance companies don't want to pay for wellness. They do a little bit now. You might get a membership to the Y, for example, but to go after it big time, they don't, which is a major mistake because there'll be less sick people at the other end. But insurance companies don't. They're starting to pay for wellness exams. So, like Medicare, you can get your yearly wellness exam, and insurance will pay for it. But some insurance companies don't. If they did pay for everything in wellness and prevention, they probably would go broke. But I still think in the long run they would save money. Okay, but we have obesity profiteers, from nutritionists to Jenny Craig to Weight Watchers to gym programs. Actually, I found out, to my sadness, I go to Planet Fitness, a great place, $10 a month. And I worked out there on a regular basis. So I asked the guy that asked what % of the people that have memberships work out regularly. You know what he said? 10%. 10%. When you think about it, they were a select group that went there in the first place. So what % of the people work out regularly? 3.5% maybe. My experience in reading indicates that exercise is good for you psychologically, puts you in the right mood, more likely to do other positive things. But in terms of controlling your weight, it does very little. Most people exercise a lot, they eat it right back. Yeah, 70, 80%. So the type of food is really the answer. So they have found that no one drug does a lot, okay? They're complex because there's so many genes involved with obesity, like 32 genes are related to putting on weight, but that only maybe in the end has a 10% effect on you. So in reality, what do we have? A metabolic problem, a problem of metabolism of insulin and leptin and the hypothalamus and the limbic system. We'll talk more about that, okay? The commercial industry, the food industry, and fast foods approved by the government. 50 years they told us fat was the problem to eat, when in reality it was sugar. And they knew it too. They knew it. The government today subsidizes the corn industry $40 billion a year. Shameful, shameful, shameful. High fructose corn syrup is sweeter than regular sugar. It's made from corn and very cheap. So they put it in everything you get your hands on. Every muffin, donut has got some fructose corn syrup in it, and you seek it because it's cheap. So what does a cookie have in it? You know, it's got sugar in it, it's got flour in it, has fructose corn syrup in it, and you can't, especially a chocolate chip one, you can't put it down. I would say this is the same for me, but it's addicting you to food. Michelle Obama, excellent lady, you know, she looks very healthy, had programs and they had gardens at the White House. I mean, you got to admit, it was a wonderful thing. But her program of vegetable gardens and Move More, eating the right food, didn't accomplish much in the nation. It's a good story. We love her, but it didn't really get the job done. She needed to get a husband to go to Congress and say, quit supporting the price of sugar and corn. That'd have been a good start. It's too cheap. We buy fast food. It's readily available. They do it all over the world now. It's readily available. It's palatable. It's full of sugar and fructose corn syrup and flours and things that hit our hedonic pathway. I'm in heaven. Let's have another one. But at least there was some leadership in the White House at that time, okay? But the USDA, the agricultural committees at the government level, they accept no responsibility, okay? And the farm support system is a travesty in terms of the health of our nation. So they go back to, you're personally responsible for eating too much and eating the wrong food. But remember, you are captured by your chemistry, which was created by the environment around you. That's what's available to you to eat. That's what's promoted. That's where the advertisements at. And some people become sugar addicts. Some people think, Dr. Lustig isn't quite sure, but the other people say it is proven that sugar is addictive. I debated it once on one of these shows right here, matter of fact. It was against Emily Bowler, and she was saying sugar is more addictive than cocaine. I think she won the debate. So it hits the dopamine and serotonin pathways, and we feel great, so we keep on eating it because we have stressful lives. Your body can't just control metabolism. It's the food you're eating that's controlling it, okay? And fats and proteins and carbohydrates, they're all metabolized differently. It's not calorie in, calorie out, okay? So the quality of the food, type of food, determines your health, okay? But how you pin your personal responsibility for your health, but how are you going to pin that on a 6-month infant? That infant is dependent on its genetic structure and metabolism based on the mother and father before conception, and epigenetics on the DNA of the infant in the uterus, for example, is the light switch, okay? You have a light and there's a switch. The epigenetic is the switch. It turns the DNA on and off, okay? So obesity, it's really not a conscious choice, largely, okay? It's due to your metabolism. As I already mentioned, diet and exercise don't work very well. I recommend it. I do it. I play pickleball, tennis, and tap dance, and God knows what else I do. But not everybody can do that, and that alone will not do it. It may help a little bit. If I slip up and have something I shouldn't have, it probably get burned up because the glycogen that stores energy in me probably would need to be stored because I've been tap dancing or playing pickleball or tennis or taking a walk in nature like I do in the mornings. And so the obesity epidemic is now a pandemic. It's all over the world, okay? And childhood obesity has no class. It hits whites and blacks and Mexicans and some racial groups more than other. It seems to hit Mexicans in the black community almost twice as much because they're under more stress. I think blacks have had some little more, genes play a part, but not huge. A little more of a genetic change because of slavery. They would starve them, no breakfast, no lunch. So what they feed them, sugar cane. That in the end caused some change in the genetic structure, but that isn't the whole thing. They're selecting the wrong food because we provide the wrong food. We don't tell them that this will lead to diabetes and all its complications, and amputations, and dementia. That information is not out there enough, and that's the reason I'm so happy that I have this opportunity to bring it to you. I will tell you something else that's making me very happy. I've been walking on a cloud ever since I heard it. I'm going to be the keynote speaker at the Martin Luther King Club's meeting at the Grand Wayne, January the 20th. You're invited, okay? And the subject they picked, not I, they did, diabetes. Isn't that wonderful? People are getting instigated. Well, is the government doing it? Is it our health association doing it? Is the hospital doing it? No. It's the Martin Luther King Society doing it. I say to that, not because I'm the speaker, the subject is that they realize the problem. So, and losing weight is not necessarily that hard short term. It's keeping it off that's the problem. They found long-term studies. People will lose 50 pounds and then gain back 70 because their body says, they're starving themselves. So it drops the basic metabolic rate, the energy used up in metabolism, doing nothing, the heart, the lungs, the thing. So if you're a big person doing nothing, you're still burning calories. Depends how big you are. But if the body decides he's starving himself, he's drops the BMR, and so now you lost 50 pounds, your BMR has dropped, you got to eat a lot less to lose further weight. Yeah, it's difficult, and but the diabetic epidemic in the world is what concerns me, and what's the American diet? It's the American diet of fat, salt, sugar, more sugar than fat and salt. There are good fats and bad fats. Are all fats bad? No. 50 years they told us it was. That was Ansel Keys and the government groups. That's well. Nina Teichholz wrote a book on that. You can read that in detail, in great detail. He told us fat was the enemy, when in reality it was sugar was the enemy. So now we're eating this fast food diet, and it goes across the globe. It's in China, it's in India, fast food stores, and the foods have been processed of the nutrients, the vitamins, the minerals, the phytochemicals that turn our appetite off. They've been stripped out of there. So your nutrient need, you eat more, the chemicals that are needed to turn your appetite off in the limbic system and hypothalamus in these foods. So you keep on eating because you're missing the chemicals that turn your appetite down. It's about leptin and insulin. The ventral medial hypothalamic area, the hypothalamus, which is about as large as your thumbnail, is a control center for eating. It controls leptin secretion. If you eat, for example, the insulin level goes up, which affects the leptin level and affects and turns that enzyme on and off. So that controls the psychological aspect of eating, is leptin and insulin and other hormones too, thyroid hormone, cortisol, but the leptin and insulin are the main ones. So you can talk about free will, but when determine what we eat is our biochemistry, it's really not free will. It's not really free will. And so it's the reaction between our DNA, epigenetics, and the environment around us determine what we want to eat. Okay, so our behavior is modeled by our biochemistry. What's going on? The hormones going on in your body, and the biochemistry is molded by what's around us, what's available, and stress, for example. Okay, but gluttony and sloth, eating too much and sitting all day is driven by our hormones. They give us feelings. Okay, and how did they discover this chemistry? Okay, and Dr. Lustig worked a lot with children. He's a pediatric endocrinologist, and he was in Tennessee, and he had some children there that had tumors of the hypothalamus and the pituitary, and they received radiation, and it would knock out the VMM hypothalamic center, the control center, that puts out the chemicals that stimulate eating or stop eating, and they could not stop eating. They just kept on eating. The children all they want to do all day is eat, become very obese. They were alive. They've been cured of their tumors, but they had an impossible life of weight. Fortunately, the number was limited, but he saw a lot of them, okay? again, biochemistry and hormones drive our behavior, okay? And what is the path of our food? The mouth, the stomach, and the enzymes are secreted there. They study it now. They have a way of studying hormones now by through MRI scans, and they could see the MRI that the chemicals would light up in the tongue and the mouth and the esophagus, and they can really follow that we have receptors for food all the way down there, and it's not just in the stomach, for example. So insulin is the fat storage hormone. It's antibiotic. So when we give insulin for diabetes, for example, because if you have one cell that has receptors on them, okay, it's insulin's job to take sugar, open the door to the cell, these receptors, for the cell for energy. But you hear the term insulin resistance, where these receptors are so full of fats, sugar gets converted to triglycerides. So the triglycerides make these receptors sticky, and insulin cannot get the sugar in for energy, okay? So the pancreas keeps on secreting insulin higher and higher, and what do we check in people when we screen them? The blood sugar. But the insulin level was up 10, 15 years ago, and we don't test for them. We should check for insulin levels in children. I'm having a hard time convincing the head of pediatrics, state of Indiana, to change the system of teaching. He doesn't seem to call back. But I'm going to keep on screaming about it, because if we're going to beat this epidemic, we got to teach the kids. Dr. Joseph Kraft wrote a book, I'll hold it up later, who studied autopsies and blood tests in 1975. Yeah, he wrote the book in 2006. He studied children 3 to 90. That's the information I'm coming from. Okay, Joseph Kraft. I'll hold this book now. This is really the Bible. This is really begins. Okay, diabetes epidemic. Should everyone be tested? Absolutely not. Only those that are concerned about their health. That's Kraft. You can see him on YouTube too, incidentally. 92 years old, speaking to another doctor. So. So we have the ventromedial hypothalamic nucleus where leptin and insulin have their effect, okay? Insulin, which drives sugar in, okay, blocks the leptin signal, which turns your appetite down. So then you have leptin resistance, and your appetite doesn't go down, and you got to keep on eating. That's how you gain weight. So insulin resistance, leptin resistance, they work together, okay? So insulin, besides pushing the sugar into the cell, it also opens the door to let fats into the cell. And that's how your cells get bigger, and that's how you get obese. Yeah. The number of fat cells that you have is generally known by age 2 or so. Yeah. You don't develop fat cells after that, but you can empty them or fill them depending on what you're eating. Remember, insulin fills them. Dr. Lustig did autopsies on type 1 diabetics where they have no insulin, okay, that died in an accident, no vascular disease. Mm-hmm. So he determined that all insulin is the beginning of vascular disease, arrhythmias of the heart, seeing trouble, numbness of the arms and legs, for example. This thumbnail hypothalamus is a control center of all metabolism, okay? It's the CEO, the head of the company. And right below that is the pituitary gland, okay? Also very small is the executive director, okay? To give you some idea how complex it is, but we have 50 hormones in our body, and all of them are slightly affected by what we eat. The vagus nerve, we have the autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic, the stressor, okay? And the vagus, which slows us down, okay? But the vagus nerve connects to all digestive systems. The stomach, the pancreas, the gut, the hypothalamus, every fat cells is innervated by the vagus nerve, by the liver, for example. So we're explaining another avenue into weight problems, okay? Leptin, called leptose, was discovered in 1994, and it's the holy grail of obesity, okay? And drug companies were studying the daylights out of it. Matter of fact, a company spent all kind of money to have total control of it, and they spent so much money in research, and spend $1 billion in research and find out drugs don't work. It's too complex. It's too complex. So they sold it to Amgen, and because they wanted some medication that would affect the leptin. I don't blame them, but that's been a total failure. Okay? So there's defective leptin signaling. So every person has a leptin signal. These receptors take a certain chemical to upgrade them or downgrade them. And so we have insulin resistance, where the insulin cannot get the sugar into the cell, but we also have leptin resistance. The leptin and insulin interact with each other. Some people, what's called hypothalamic obesity, they have a tumor there, for example. No amount of calorie, and become extremely obese, no amount of calorie restriction works. Mm-hmm. So just cutting back in calories, not the answer to being overweight. It helps. Type of food is the most important thing. These people with hypothalamic obesity, they can eat 500 calories and still gain weight. Can you imagine how horrible the situation is? And the one who've had the VMH site irradiated, say, I mean, it's in a hopeless situation. So insulin is a leptinator. If you're taking insulin for diabetes, you're going to gain weight. It's anabolic. And that makes things worse. So every year, you got to take more of it. And as I already mentioned, diabetes can cause dementia and vascular disease, amputations, unannounced heart attacks. The heart attacks can be unannounced because diabetes causes neuropathy, and the nerves to the heart can be impaired, and you don't feel the chest pain. And a significant number of people grab their chest and die. 50% of people die from heart disease. They just grab their chest and they're gone. No angina, no warning. That's due to neuropathy. Yeah, that's the reason I'm so adamant about stopping, preventing, reversing it. So insulin is a leptinator, okay, because it turns off the leptin signal. And food addiction, like Dr. Lustig says, I don't think it's quite proven. I think it is. Most people think it is. Most people think sugar is like cocaine. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it is. So what can increase the insulin level? Sugar can do it the most. Fructose corn syrup, even worse. But even protein can. Mm-hmm. You can eat meat. It'll cause some increase but the one that increases insulin the least, fat. Mm-hmm. Yeah, eat good fats, omega-3 fats. Go into fat metabolism a little bit by fasting, for example. Length of time you don't eat anything. It's about 7-8 hours. You'll be into fat metabolism. The fat cells open up and allow triglycerides out. They're transported by a protein to the liver and made into ketones and use them as energy. So ketones, even the brain can work on ketones. This signaling is between these hormones, and even cortisol, the adrenal gland, because of stress, increases cortisol. And cortisol can metabolize fatty acids very quickly, and that's the reason people who are in a lot of stress sometimes will get pot bellies, because the amount of fat in there. Some fat, especially belly fat, can be very inflammatory, cause a lot of disease. While fats on the pelvis, for example, are not, or subcutaneous fat is not as metabolic, not as inflamed. It's belly fat that's really a problem. So one of the best tests for screening people is a belly measurement. Mm-hmm. What size belt are you using? It's better than a blood test. Yeah, you get a pot belly, you get diabetes unless you prove it to me with a blood test. Remember I said that, okay? And the American Psychiatric Association has about 77 criteria to determine, what's addictive. And if you have 3 of the 7, you could be addicted. You could tolerate it. You have withdrawal symptoms, binging. You have so much desire, say for sugar, you can't quit. You're craving, you're seeking, you're hiding it. These are all things that occur in addiction. You get 3 out of 7, you could be a sugar addict, okay? It starts interfering with life. That's an important thing. You can't wait till you eat that donut or get up middle of the night and have one, but that's addictive behavior, okay? And it has, consequences. Tolerance you can develop. Some people think dependency tolerance, that's really addiction. In Europe, that's how they define it, okay? And but from the movie Super Size Me that you can eat bad food. He ate it for 18 days, and he extremely overweight, diabetes, hypertension. That can occur matter of weeks. Okay? And what makes fast food addictive? Dr. Lustig focuses on the food itself, okay? Full of sodium, fat, sugar, caffeine, calories. That's what makes it feel good. And when you look across the world, the way these, like in India, China, they have more diabetics in China than any other country. For one thing, they have the largest number of people. We're not talking about percentage, the number of people. In India, it's out of hand, okay? Let me give you an example of a Big Mac. 1,350 calories, 90 grams of sugar, 30% fat, okay? What do you think? There's about 2,500 sodium chemicals in there. Our daily intake should not be more than that, so 1 hamburger will do it. Lustig would say some of this is a preservative, but also salt's addictive. You eat a fast food restaurant, they'll add a lot of salt into it, and you seek the salt, the sugar, for example. And sometimes they'll add caffeine. You can be dependent on that. Some people think we can become addicted to sugar, to coffee. I hope not. 2 or 3 cups a day. And but you find coffee now in a lot of food. It gives a salience. It makes it taste a little bit better. You add sugar, you eat salt, some high fructose corn syrup, and we are in heaven, okay? And soda addiction, that's a big one. That one you clearly got to stop because sugar content, fructose corn syrup in a lot of sodas, and even the ones that look like they're pure water, if they get some color to them, those toxins in there may not be good for you. What it does, even if you use some of the supplements, like stevia being the best of them, what happens right away, your brain thinks you're adding a lot of sugar, and your brain changes. Hormones secrete and affect your whole body. It also affects your biome in your gut. So sugar substitutes, don't use them. Stevia is the best of them, but the majority indeed do have side effects. They will not help you a lot. So obesity is about insulin resistance, being overweight. Is and leptin resistance, insulin resistance, leptin resistance. In many unhappy people, because they're driven by their biochemistry. They're driven by their biochemistry. That's why they just can't stop eating. So they need to either fast or don't use the substance if they can to get over the addictive process. And but most people that are overweight are habituated, tolerant of fat, salt, and sugar. And they all play a part, but sugar is really the main one. And stress has a big part too. A lot of a stress eater. Lives are stressful, okay? I mean, 60% of the people barely get $100 in their bank account. Okay, so let's face it, most people are leading stressful lives. And life is not this smooth thing here. It's, even for me, it's like this, and then bongo is down, and that's life, you know. It's the amygdala, the medial part of the temporal lobe. The temporal lobe is involved with stress, secretes hormones, and affects the hypothalamus, the pituitary, the adrenal gland. Cortisol is secreted, which sends messages to hypothalamus, to your gut, to your appetite, and sends messages to the autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic, and the relaxer, the adrenaline would be the stressor, and then we have the relaxer, the vagus nerve, okay? And that affects our eating habits, our blood pressure, our gut motility. Stress is dessert spelled backwards. Okay? So cortisol stimulates us to eat comfort foods, to feel comfortable, to feel good. It's the hormones in the body that do it. So stress eaters have increased insulin, increased weight, cortisol more secreted at night while we're sleeping. So less if you're sleeping good. If you're stressed, it increases. So cortisone can lead to stress belly, beer belly, stress belly, sugar belly, beer belly, then we talk about the limbic triangle, okay, and that's we're talking about in the brain. Hunger, reward, stress, they drive hyperinsulinemia, and that's what diabetes is all about. Hyperinsulinemia is diabetes, okay? And obesity is related to the anabolic hormone insulin. Insulin's really the guy. He is, and leptin, but insulin, remember, is the one that affects us, leptin. So to check the leptin, the insulin level in people is very important, especially even as children. We catch them on the path to weight problems, but they don't do it. I don't know why they don't want to do it, but I'm pushing it that we should be getting insulin levels yearly, starting at age 3. The book of Dr. Kraft, he tested them from 3 to age 90, and he found increased insulin levels on the way to the diagnosed diabetes 4 or 5 years old. Mm-hmm. We should record those, put them in a book or on a chip or on the computer, and keep track. To follow the path, we can prevent tremendous amount of disease. But even pediatricians, very few, don't do it. But I've been speaking to them, but we'll see if they step up to bat. Okay? And it's like the Bermuda Triangle. These hormones, we're in there and we just can't get out. But information, reading books, realizing what it could do to you, some people will change, and they do. They'll stop Starbucks or someplace where I'm at and say, hey, doc, I lost 20 pounds. My diabetes is gone. I'm on no medication. I'm saving thousands of dollars. Thank you. So how do you feed a fat cell? Okay, how do you make a fat cell? The number is determined by age 2. I said that already, okay? But you need some fat cells. We need some fat in us, otherwise girls wouldn't look so good, okay? So we need some fat. Us men too, okay? But remember, but the mother's control of the fat cell by what she's eating is affecting the infant because through epigenetic, they can turn the genes on and off by the type of food that we're eating. And other things, whether they're listening to music or arguments or stress, mother produces a stressed infant. So a child can be born very thin or very heavy. The diabetics tend to have large babies because the metabolism is different, okay? And they're going to have trouble. They're going to have trouble. And some people say, well, genetics determines 50% of what's going to happen and the rest by what we do. No, actually, you won't believe this. Only about 5% of your genes have been expressed when you're in your uterus. 5%. 95% is determined by what the mother does and that what you do over the next decade or two. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Isn't it? What's the good news about it? What the mother does, what you do, what the father does before conception, all can affect a health a great deal. So epigenetics is very important. But most of its work is done after conception and before birth. Okay, now a new field is developed called Developmental Origins of Health and Disease, DOHAD. You can Google it and get more information, which is looking at maternal nutrition affecting the infant, whether the child is going to be overweight and underweight. That's turning this into sort of a specialty, which I think is critical. It's critical. We're not teaching the mother and father enough about how they can influence their child through epigenetics and then affect the rest of their life. Okay? So many babies are born, premature babies can have insulin resistance. Mm-hmm. Some need insulin right away even, okay? Remember I already mentioned gestational diabetes, where the mother has diabetes and it's affecting the genetics and epigenetics of the infant. So she must correct it very quickly. That's the first you know about it, okay? So insulin is the fat storage hormone. We mentioned that already. You block the effects of insulin and the fat goes down in the body. Cells open up, let the fat out. So the vagus nerve is also the storage hormone of fat also, okay? In a sense, every fat cell has a branch of the vagus nerve, okay? An autonomic nerve, okay? And so how can you get the fat cell to slim down? Eat less sugar. That's a good start. Go into fat metabolism, maybe a little bit of keto. I don't like the big keto stuff. They're eating too much fat, and to me, that's dangerous. But if you fast a bit, or just, eat at 5 o'clock and then at 9 o'clock, you've been fasting. Okay, you're into fat metabolism for a few hours. Fat cells will let out fat, gets transferred by proteins. I think it's amylin, I think it's called, to the liver, made into ketones, and the ketones go back out in the blood system, and you're metabolizing using ketones for energy. Okay, so the scale, we get on a scale, this is what I weigh, but the scale lies, okay? So what's more important is, where is the fat? Belly fat is a lot worse than hip fat, for example. So, but you can indeed. So some people might even call the BMI the baloney mass index. Yeah. still use it because it's easier, but remember I said, most important is belly measurement. What is your waist size? I remember one of my relatives on the other side, when his sister was upstairs sleeping, he was in the basement, and I knew he had diabetes. And I asked, what's your belly size? He says, it's a 36. I happen to have a tape measurement on me, and it's 42 inches, morbidly obese, okay? He's got diabetes. Now he can't see right, so now he can't urinate right. We think it's going on. He still doesn't see it. He has diabetes, okay? So we have to open our eyes up, okay? So fat that is in our viscera, around our bowels, in the liver, in the organs, that fat is a lot more dangerous than fat under your skin. We need a little bit under the skin, okay? And so you can do a waist-hip ratio, okay, of waist to hip, 0.85. It is normal for a woman and one for a man. You can do DEXA scans, which will reveal whether fat is in different parts of your body. If that opportunity presents to you, feel a need for it, it's good. But remember I said, belly measurement goes a long way. So we speak about metabolic syndrome, studying the metabolism of your body, okay? And I need to know about that a little bit. But again, what I suggest is you get a serum insulin early, because that's anabolic, that causes weight gain. But metabolic syndrome, in the middle of it is insulin resistance, which would be your good cholesterol, HDL, blood pressure, belly measurement, for example. So most people have metabolic disease, you would call it, but I want you to catch yours a lot earlier than that. So what are the 4 foods of the apocalypse? Trans fats, okay, fats that are made by adding hydrogen atoms to oils, which turns them into margarine. They're very dangerous to your body. Alcohol, the fructose, the half of sucrose is fructose, which doesn't increase the insulin, but goes to the liver and right away turns into fat. That's dangerous because it's inflammatory fat. So in a summary, I think I've put out quite a bit of information for you. You know, you talk about the glycemic index, how quickly your blood sugar rises from what you eat. What's even more important is someone invented the insulin index. You can Google it, by Susan Holt, 1997. Your insulin response, which is more important than the sugar response, and there is a difference between the glycemic index and the insulin index. Like white bread, and the glycemic index is quite high, but the other foods and combinations where the insulin index is more accurate. So if you want to get a little more specific, you could study those. So if, in summary, if you are having a problem with weight, and I'd like to mention too that about 25% of the people are trophies. They're thin on the outside, but they're fat on the inside, in the liver, in their organs. So you are what your blood tests show. Show me your blood test. I don't care if you're thin. I want to see your blood test. I want to see your serum insulin. I want you to have a glucose tolerance test and an insulin tolerance test. Then you really know what's going on. And in terms of losing weight, a lot of it has to do with psychology and stress in your life. And the biochemistry of your body is controlling you. But you can affect this biochemistry by picking food better. So what's the biggest thing? Pick the right food. Pick the right food. And start with children. If you're providing the wrong food for your children, they're probably all going to become diabetic. So thanks for listening to me. If I act a little passionate, because I am. There are so many illnesses attached to diabetes, being overweight or being obese. See, obesity doesn't come first. Diabetes comes first. that I want you to get rid of these problems, have a better life, so you can play pickleball or tennis or tap dance like me. I do this because I love you. Namaste.